gonna get out. This one I love because she came with her box. So this is the original box, which has a lot of really useful information for us. So this is a French corset. And on this end of our box, so it says number 580, so that's the style number. Size 22, so it's a 22 waist, and color white. And that would have allowed the stockist at the store to have these all stacked up, and even with the lid on, you get to read what's in that box. And then inside we have this lovely corset. So this one dates to August 20th, 1901. And the reason I know that is because it says patented August 20th, 1901. Now it could be later than that. This one could have been made in 1904 or October of 1901, but the style, the pattern is patented to August 20th, 1901. Now this is a very significant date in corset history because this is the year that the S-bend came into style. Now I'm doing air quotes because as far as I can tell, S-bend is a modern term. I cannot find it used historically. If someone has reference to it historically, please let me know. In the period, this was called the military or straight front. So this is right when that was coming into style. Now, we like to harp on this style corset as being the worst, you know, the most damaging, the tightest, the most uncomfortable. But the funny thing is that this was developed as a health corset. So the original idea was that this would allow the ribcage more expansion by only constricting here and here, and it would allow for fuller bosom and breathing area. Now, it's really good marketing. Any corset can be comfortable or uncomfortable depending on if it fits you or not. But anyway, back to our lovely little straight front corset. As you can see, it has all the hallmarks of a turn of the century corset with these lovely swooping lines and the bones that cross the lines but don't follow the stitch lines in almost all cases. This one has 7 pattern pieces. The back lacing is cut in one with the back panel. There isn't a separate lacing strip on this one. And for the most part, it has paired sets of bones with a few single bones around the side. Now, what's it boned with? This one is all metal. There is no baleen in this corset. You see both at the turn of the century, and you also see coralline, which was a sort of plastic type material. Today, we really only have synthetic whalebone or steel to replicate these. It has a straight busk. Unlike our 1890s, which with the belly curve, the straight front corset has the straight busk at the front, of course. Makes sense. Again, this one is a single layer of a really nice cotton sateen. It's really tightly woven. The thread count on this is incredible. I wish we could get fabrics like this today. The bones on this one are on the interiors, and this one has a waist tape. The last one did not have a waist tape. It's about 50-50 in my experience whether an extant corset has a waist tape or not. They didn't all have waist tapes, but some of them did. You see it more universally in this era where they were getting very fancy with the swooping curves and the bias where you really do kind of need something. So the other interesting thing about this corset, and this is something that I've shown other corset makers and historians, and they're also surprised by this because it must be fairly uncommon. It actually has reinforcement bones already included. You may have seen the reinforcement pieces that could have been purchased separately at the time. They look like a belt with a bunch of bones attached to it with the idea that you would stitch that into your corset. But it's interesting to see it already in place in this one. So if you study antiques and you've seen this before and have some more information about it, I would love to hear. I've also seen this for laundering so that all the bones could be taken out, but that doesn't make sense because right behind these rather flexible steel bones is the wide bone here, which is standard to what we see. So it's just at the side seams that there's these extra ones. I don't know, maybe they were having issues with breakage on the wide bone and they found that adding some more flexible ones on the interior kind of cushioned it. I'm really not sure, but it's cool. So this whole piece comes right out and it's 3 bones in a row and they're super tiny. All of the corsets I'm talking about and all of the steel bones I'm talking about are straight steel. There are no spirals in any of these. They're all very, very light, flexible. I mean, look at that, straight steel. That's one mistake we often make in modern corsetry as well, is the idea that thicker bones are always better. It's not always the case, in my experience, at least studying extants. Another funny thing is that they actually stitched right through the additional bone strip when they added the lace at the top here, so you actually can't even pull this one out without unpicking the lace. And I believe that lace, looking at the way this is stitched, it was done by skipping every like inch or so and doing a machine stitch. So basically like pushing it through the machine and doing hand-turned occasional stitches through, because there's a bobbin thread and a top thread. Now, just like our last friend, this one is cut right off at the end. However, on this one they did a couple of like rudimentary hand stitches around the bottom, but they still didn't backstitch. The binding on all of these corsets is on the straight of grain. You don't see bias on Victorian corsets. I mean, there's always an exception to every rule. I hate to say always or never, but I have never seen bias used. What that does is it keeps the edge from stretching out. So this one is incredibly curvy. And I wish I could actually try it on and lace it on a body, because super curvy and very short. Now I'm very long-waisted, but you can see how much flare there is. So this was made to fit a very curvy body type, and maybe have had a little bit of padding added in the top. You know, a very full chemise. You got full drawers, all of that kind of helps fill in, or they could be wearing padding in addition. There is a faint penciled in 12 right here, and that corresponds to the length of the bust. So that's telling the next girl in line what size bust to put into this corset. All of the seams on this corset are flat felled. And they are true flat felled, so it's not stitched and then turned to one side, turned under, and top stitched. It is the type where it actually does interlock like that, and you've got stitching here and stitching here. So there is a lip on both the front and the back. Busk is simply cut and inserted. For our last corset, we have the WT Staybone. This one also came with an original box. The box is absolutely trashed, but it's still here. I still have pretty much all of the pieces. So this is fun because it says, the first real advancement in corset manufacturing made in years. This feature is found only in WT Staybone corsets. Bones guaranteed to keep their original position in the corset. The most annoying fault of all other corsets is corrected in this one, that of having the bones push up and come through the binding. You gotta love that antique advertising hubris, right? So what the heck is a staybone? Well, what it means is that the bone is glued into a thin crinoline type fabric, which is then caught into the stitching in the bone casing. So the bones are glued in place in this corset. They're not going anywhere. They cannot slide in the casing. And that actually removes a little bit of the friction at the bottoms and the tops of the bones. Now, as we know from Victorian advertising, their wild and crazy claims were not always true. So this one is fun because someone cut into this corset, it was not me, and removed a bone, which means that I can actually get in there and see that crinoline wrapping and see how this was inserted metal as well. So this corset, the WT Staybone, patented November 13th, 1917. So 1917, underbust corsets, right? So this one sits low. Again, I'm really long-waisted, so this is kind of funny looking, but you can kind of see the shape it would take. This one also does have the lovely built-in, stitched-in garters. This one has very light boning. It has two large bones. One is at about the side seam and one's at about the side back seam. That would probably help get that column shape that was popular at the time. The wide bones in all of these corsets are not quite as hefty as the half-inch bones that are available now from most vendors. They're still a little bit thinner, a little bit more delicate. The same with the busks. This one's fairly rigid, but for the most part the busks are quite lightweight. Especially the 1890s corset, that busk is very thin indeed. There's a little hook down here to close the gap below the busk at the front. Again, pretty rough finishing on this one. Straight binding, small stitches, and the binding again is just cut. I have seen a couple of extant corsets that are clearly dead stock. They were never used, they were never worn, and they will actually have the bottom binding attached from one side to the other. I don't know if that was a universal manufacturing trick. It would be a good way to keep your pairs together in the showroom and up until purchase. You don't have half a corset running away, or you don't end up accidentally mismatching, like mismatched shoes. So this one is 3 pieces. Very simple pattern at this time. We've got 1, 2, and 3 pieces here. There's no additional darting or gores or anything. This would be a very simple first corset for someone to make. So there's a little walk through our extant corset collection. I hope to add to this collection over the next few years, but we have a good start so far. It's cool to see what is common between the 3, because this is spanning at least 20, maybe 30 years of corset making history, and there's the commonality throughout the manufacturing process on all 3 of these. Thanks for watching.